There's four really key events in the or elements that make the tallgrass prairie a tallgrass. And I think it's that way with almost all prairies, as far as I know. And the four key events are rainfall, sunshine, fire, and grazers. Those are the four things. The first two I don't have a whole lot of control over, okay? Rainfall and sunlight, it comes when it wants to. But I can prescribe fire and I can prescribe grazing. So those are four events that happen in the tallgrass prairie that make the prairie a prairie. It's real important that we work with all four of those elements. They're all tied to each other. Take out any one of the four and the prairies can no longer function. The grasses and all the native plants have all evolved around fire, and their growing points are below ground, and woody tree species, any kind of wood species and stuff, growing points are above ground, and so fire keeps them at bay. That's the trump card that Mother Nature put into the mix when she created the tallgrass prairie. About once every third year, every acre needs to burn. Once a tree gets much higher than your knee, you can't hardly take him out unless you got pretty good fuel loads or whatever. And so let's go into the grazing side of it. I have two different programs that I graze here on the ranch. And the majority of all my grazing is built around double stock, intensive early stocking, IES, or double stocked, or 90-day cattle, or however you want to put it. And basically what that entails is I graze twice as many cattle on the same amount of acres, but only half as long. So I only graze the last week of April, all of May, all of June, and the first 2.5 weeks of July. The other system I work with is patch burn grazing. And I was a little skeptic at first when that concept first came out. I just could not see how that could possibly work for the cattle side of it. The land side of it, I somewhat understood a little easy. It was easier for me to understand. And so I started patch burn grazing 6 years ago. I went through 7 seasons now, 6 or 7, I think, seasons of patch burn grazing. And I've always owned the cattle that I grazed on the patch burn. And I own them, and I know what kind of cattle they are, and I weigh all my cattle in and I weigh all my cattle out because we sell them off of grass and stuff like that. And I do own cattle on double stocked, annual burn double stocked also. And out of the 6 years that I've been patch burn grazing, probably 3 or 4 of them, the patch burn, the performance has been anywhere from 5 to 10 pounds better. And probably 2 or 3 years, it's probably been 5 or 10 pounds less. So there's no significant difference between the patch burn grazing and the double stock annual burn grazing. And I've run 6 or 7 groups of cattle through both systems back to back, just year after year, and there's just no significant, and they told me that in the research. They said there'll be no significant difference. One year it might be a little better, and some years it might not be quite as good, but there's no significant difference, and turns out there's not. Okay, so that's a pretty cool system, right? Patch burn grazing. And of course everybody knows or most people know what patch burn grazing. That's where you burn 1/3 of it, but you stock the pasture according to the total acres, and the cattle all camp on the 1/3 and they eat on it, and then they graze a little bit on the other deal, and you build up big fuel loads, and you're rotating every year. So every 3 years you go through the system and it works. Okay, so that's easy enough for the cattle performance side. The challenge I see with patch burn grazing is there's 2 ways to burn. One of them is to talk about it and go to the coffee shop and talk about it with everybody there and come up with all kinds of excuses, and then in the end you don't burn nothing, and you go, well, next year I'm going to burn a lot more next year. and you end up not burning anything, and you keep your matches in your pocket. The other way that's real easy to burn is you just light, and you keep lighting, and you burn every acre everywhere, and you don't ever stop lighting, and you don't care, you just keep it going, and you just want to keep burning. That's the other easy way to do it. Now, patch burn is a little different, because you got to start a fire and you got to stop it. And every year it's different. You got a different patch. So now you got to start it and you got to stop it. And that's the key, is stopping it. It's not always easy. And then you have neighbors that's wanting to burn up against you. And so it creates all these challenges. So the fire aspect of patch burn grazing is a little more difficult. But I like wildlife. And the reason I like wildlife is because I think wildlife is just part of the community. They've got just as they were here long before I got here. And so to me, wildlife is just like the plants that are here. They're real true indicators of what's going on, the health that's going on. And so that's why it's okay to have some bare spots out there and some rock outcroppings and stuff like that. It doesn't have to always be total grass production, 4,500 pounds of grass, and so we can run 6,000 pounds of beef to the acre and all of this. We don't have to have all of that. It's okay to have a diverse deal out there. And so wildlife to me is just part of the community, and they're good indicators. Grassland birds, whether they be prairie chickens, whether they be dick thistles, whether they be meadowlarks, whether they be prairie plovers, the upland sandpipers, or whatever, have to have last year's thatch to build their nest to hatch out their chicks, and that's how it works. Okay. Now, if I burn every acre for these double-stalk steers, which I do, when I burn every acre, I'm very good at burning up every bit of the thatch and the nest building ability for next year. Okay, I mean, there's just no way there's anything left here for them to build a nest out of. And so that's why this patch burn has come to start to play with me, has interested me, and that I'm leaving 2/3 of the old growth and only burning 1/3 of it. And so from that, I've changed my burning regime on the rest of the ranch to where I'm doing what I call, and maybe it's just me, kind of a spot burn deal, where I used to light from point A all the way to point B and then down to C and back to D, and then go circle the thing and burn it all, and then anything that didn't burn, go back and reburn all of it. Now I just spot burn, just turn some fires loose, and they willy-nilly go wherever they want to go, and they burn out these mosaic patterns. And so parts that don't burn, I feel like Mother Nature didn't intend for those to burn anyway. And so there's no reason to go relight those. And so the cattle won't visit those spots, and so they grow extra forage. And so then the following year or 2 years from now, they will burn. And so I've stopped this where I burn every acre every year thing, and I'm switching over to a more mosaic burn pattern thing. I don't know. The patch burn, it is pretty a 1/3, 2/3 regime that's pretty. But my other deal, I may burn 90%, I may burn 70%, I may burn 65%. I don't know. Every year it's changing on me. And so I'm starting to leave some grass behind for the grassland birds. And in the process of doing that, because I'm doing it for the community, because the grassland birds belong here, but fire belongs here too. So fire belongs here, the birds belong here, and the big challenge is, and I'm not going away, humans belong here too. And so that's a really big challenge. And when we think of programs and we think of things that's going on out here on the prairie, we always have to remind ourselves that humans are part of it too. And we're not going to go away. In fact, there's probably going to be more of us. And so we have to keep thinking, how can we approach this thing, this thought process, and that's where this community-based conservation comes in for me, is we got to think of the community, because humans are part of the community too. So what's best for all of us? How does it all work together?